Welcome to the Momentum Flow podcast, where ideas, innovations, and experiences are shared to create continuous stream of inspiration and insight. Join me, your host, Luis Solana, a supply chain expert and investor, as I uncover how visionary founders, operators, and leaders are spotting opportunities, sparking innovation, and scaling profitable growth. From plan to cash, I bring real-world experience and an investor's eye to reveal how clarity, capital, and conviction fuel sustainable growth. Tune in and let's keep the momentum flow going. So today, I'm thrilled to welcome Chris O'Brien, CEO of Armada Supply Chain Solutions. Chris brings a rare blend of frontline sales experience, deep P&L stewardship, and 2 decades on the C-suite leadership team at C.H. Robinson Worldwide, one of the largest global 3PL providers, helping scale their business from $3 billion to over $23 billion in revenue. Today, he's applying those lessons at Armada, a company with roots in food service going back to the 1890s, now reimagining how logistics and supply chain partners drive profitable growth for iconic brands across America. In this conversation, we'll explore how commercial excellence, customer obsession, and scaled innovation create profitable growth. Chris, welcome to the Momentum Flow.
Thanks a lot, Luis. Appreciate you having me.
I really appreciate you joining us. Thank you. So to start, would you share a bit about your career journey, your early days as account manager in the suburbs of Chicago, right? To chief commercial officer at C.H. Robinson, multiple corporate advisories and limited partnership investments, to now the Armada CEO.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so it did start in Chicago at C.H. Robinson, a unique role where you do a little bit of everything. You're account manager, you're a carrier, a procurement person, and I think that was sort of foundational for me. You had a P&L, you were paid a share of the P&L of an office, you were accountable for the receivables of your customers, so it was a really unique first job. I had several throughout my career at C.H. Robinson, a stint in Europe. I opened up an office in the U.S., about 6 years in Europe as we were building out a network of offices there. And then I spent about 15 of those years at the headquarters in a senior leadership role in Minneapolis, as you said, that culminating in chief commercial officer. And after 1 year off, I started at Armada, a business that I knew, some leaders that I knew, a year and a half ago as president, and I've been CEO of Armada Supply Chain Solutions since January of this year. So it's been a lot of stops in between, but always in the supply chain, and now a total of 34 years in the industry.
Oh, quite a journey, Chris. So what keeps you motivated all along this journey?
You know, I've never really had to think about, motivating myself. That's been something that's been pretty easy for me over the years. I run pretty high on energy. Um, I would say it's gone really fast. I feel like, life goes fast, but career seems to go even faster. It feels like it's just blown by. Chicago seems like yesterday. So there was a lot of stops in between. There was about, 7 different roles at C.H. Robinson, 2 now here. All of them have been fun and challenging. And the common thing for me, especially today, is competing. Building a team to compete and win is ultimately, if I could pick one spot that I'm going to be in, that's that. I've always been customer facing, and I'm driven by driving change to make a business better for employees that serve customers and sell to them, and for the customers themselves. So I think the speed with which my career happened drove some of it, but in some ways I think I'm fortunate, and that self-motivation's never been something I had to study.
That's awesome. So really, for me, what immediately stands out in your journey is that you've seen this business from nearly every commercial vantage point, carrying a bag, leading a billion-dollar organization, now the CEO. So those experiences really create a unique operating lens. And I'd like to begin there because I think our audience will recognize that the best leaders don't just accumulate titles, right? They develop perspective. So let's compare your lenses a bit. So looking at your background, you cannot but notice really the balance between being in the field with customers and being accountable for P&Ls at a massive scale. So how do you describe your operating lens today as a CEO?
Yeah, I think balance is the right word to talk about it. I I did start with that role of having P&L accountability and being customer facing, and that has been consistent throughout my whole career. I would say those are the two primary lenses. As a leader and now as a CEO, I think the next two are, the future, the future strategy, the planning of an enterprise, the planning of large businesses that I've run in the past. And then the last one for me is team, developing a team, getting your team right, succession, thinking about the longevity of your team, your process, and now, today as CEO of a business and a company. But I I think starting out and having that, I feel fortunate to have started out having both commercial accountability and P&L accountability. I think those are really grounding for me and it impacted the way I think about business and career. But you mentioned balance, and I think that for me, that's why it's so fun, especially now with this team and Armada and this unique culture is, so much going for us. And so many things you get to touch as a leader. I like to keep my fingers in a lot of different things, but the two that keep me grounded are staying customer facing and driving a P&L.
So you have a rich background in execution. So, but that frontline sales experiences probably shaped the strategy that you're referring to. So how about?
Yeah, I think starting in sales, yes, maybe even account management a little bit more,
Okay.
customer facing. That role evolved over time throughout my journey to be an account manager and then a leader of account managers and a leader of salespeople, and then ultimately designing systems for customers and teams, how we're going to interface with our largest customers and how do we go to market differently was that lens. But I think I like to know, I like to be hands-on enough to be able to be leading something that I know and be able to walk in the footsteps of the things that I've been trying to change. And for the first, you know, 30 years of my career, that led to a commercial leadership role. And um, and those were just always areas that I felt extremely comfortable because I did that. I did that at one company. I knew the operations, I knew the P&L, I knew the customer. But I think it's a choice. The choice I made over that career and that I continue to today is I could have decided to move to just a leadership role and now focus just on a P&L or just focused internally. My choice was to stay grounded in the external, to stay connected to customers at every step of that way. It was easier because that's where I started, but it's still a choice. You've got a limited number of hours available in the day. I'm always thinking about where can I spend my time? Where can I be the most valuable? I choose to make sure that I can be helpful to the teams I'm building by really knowing the business. I came into Armada knowing an industry, but the business was different.
Yeah.
And so I had to immediately get out and learn the teams, the offices. I spent a year almost entirely on the road getting to know the customers, the carrier network, the people, because that's just the way I grew up. I grew up understanding and being in a business that I knew, something that I'd operated and sold and managed. And I just don't feel real if I don't understand the business from the bottom up.
So let me ask you that token. So you probably have an opinion about something that operators underestimate about commercial leadership until they have to carry a P&L. What comes to mind?
You know, I don't know about that one. I've always had a P&L, so it's a hard one for me
Okay.
to answer. And I've grown up on the commercial side. I've probably almost seen the opposite of
Okay.
commercial leaders that didn't have the burden of a P&L or the privilege of a P&L in the past. Uh, like I said, I spent a lot of my time leading and driving commercial teams, growing up in a role that was a combination of driving a business, driving a P&L, that ultimately to me is the two things are to me are they work so much hand in hand that you're not going to be successful if you don't sell profitable business, and you're not going to grow your business if you're not keeping customers happy. But I do remember a time when I moved into the corporate side of things, and it's jumped out at me in my past people that have not had the P&L experience, but only the commercial side. And um, I've always thought it was a good thing for them in their career to take that step and say, hey, make sure your ideas work in within the P&L. It's easier to poke holes in things, and if you aren't accountable for the bottom line results. And um, so although I feel like that's probably the bigger gap I've seen is those that didn't have the P&L, but only the commercial side. And I think it's important, really important to have both.
That's interesting. So at the end, profitable growth only happens when commercial ambition and operational reality really stay in sync, right? So what do you think leaders most often lose that balance, right? Because you need to, it goes back to balance, but you need to be balanced, right?
Yeah, I think so. Like I said, I made a choice in my career to always stay grounded with customers. And you have to do certain things. You have to prioritize your time in order to do that. I saw areas where I thought I could impact the business on behalf of customers and customers, and people that serve them by driving change.
Mhm.
And you can do that by looking internally at your company and understanding what you think you need to change. My view was that I wanted my perspective as a leader to always be informed by what would really move the needle for customers. I
Okay.
felt like I had the benefit of knowing, having carried a bag, like you said, having managed customers, and knowing a business from the inside out. I think the thing that changes more quickly is technology and your customers' needs. So again, um, I think it was easier for me to keep my balance, but again, it was a choice to constantly say, "Hey, that's a really large deal that's in front of us. Uh, I want to poke my nose into that one, and one, I think I can help." Um, or here's even harder, a customer where things aren't going right, where it's a little bit more uncomfortable to get involved. And that's where you really need to drive change, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that's the harder thing, just like anything in business and life. It's embracing those areas where it's uncomfortable, the uncomfortable conversation, the development feedback that people are talking about, but haven't given that, that person. You have the choice to either embrace or ignore the customer that's also got a pain point with your company. And so I went out of my way to drive that balance by listening to them as well.
I,
Even
I
though
really
it can hurt.
I really think that's one of the things, the time I've known you, which is a few decades, that we'll leave it there. So, is that, you really think that I believe that strategy only creates value when it really survives that contact with customers, right? When you're leading operations, commercial organizations, at the end, everything gets validated ultimately by the commercial organizations, everything gets validated by the customer.
Yeah.
So that naturally brings us to something you've been known for throughout your career. And no surprise to you, I'm going to talk about customer obsession, right? And not as a slogan, but as an operating system. And so, you know, as I go back and think about you, Chris, you know, you describe yourself a couple times to me as a customer champion, someone who listens deeply, but also turns insight into internal improvement. In your experience, what separates real customer listening from just pretending to listen you, just theater?
Hmm. I, I would say, and you got to experience this directly with me. You were my customer,
Mhm.
so you got to experience this directly. But I think the biggest separator is if you do something about it. Listening's interesting. Listening can be a skill, and we can talk about like the technical side of it and how to get scientific about it. Um, but I think the real differentiator is, are you willing to take what you listen to and drive change? Are you, and I'll go back to that statement I made on, the uncomfortable areas and the places where it might be easier to look away. In my career, I've had the fortunate, position to be at well-run companies. At Armada, our customers love us, but you can always find an area where there's something that you think you can improve, and it's probably more comfortable to only listen to your accolades and your award-winning customers. So you sometimes have to seek it out, but that's one difference maker. But I think the bigger test is in my career has been listening to them, but taking that feedback and driving change.
So
Because
let me just deep dive on that one. So how do you decide which customer signals deserve investing and which ones are just noise?
Well, for me, let's park two things. One is the technical and scientific side of listening. And to me, that's, I've always put in a net promoter score program. So you've got good data around, how many customers really feel that way. You've got, good firmographics on the size and the types of customers that you're doing well on. So part of my career has always been setting up those systems so you've got that smart scientific learning. But how I think it's done the best is by directly listening yourself too. And because if you're listening, you're involved, right? You force your own involvement in the business to to be able to listen, to be able to get that feedback. If somebody doesn't know you and doesn't trust you, they're not going to share that feedback with you. The developmental, the positive, you have to become relevant to a customer in order to develop the openness that they'll share that and ultimately develop a relationship. And I think that's, hopefully where I've made a difference over the years is to be able to get close enough to someone that they can say, hey, your team is not getting it done. But if they tell you that three times in a row and you didn't make any change, I don't know that you're just going to drive more frustration.
Yeah, you need to listen, right? For sure. So now you you're describing obviously the Chris I've interacted most is that commercial lead, right? And but now you're the CEO, and in order to stay close with customers, you could become the bottleneck at a certain moment, right? Because you don't have the time to do it. So how do you balance that? How do you stay close to customers in your new role?
Yeah, that's a good point, and I've had to check myself on that. Every CEO, every leader's got the things that are their strengths, and they're easy places to spend a little bit more time, like just listening to your fans. That's an area that's probably a higher comfort for people. Um, I also think that every CEO brings something different to the table. And I mentioned those four lenses of P&L, customer, building your team, um, and making sure you've got the operations straight, and then the future planning. So there's no one area that you can avoid in terms of running a business. But I think when the CEO has got the moments where to drive those four things, they can pick, their extra time that they want to spend some business. It should be in the areas that are either deficits for the business or the areas that you have particular strengths. And so, although, and so for me, um, I look at what's the company need to go? What are the things, where are our strengths that we can leverage and where are the gaps that we need to accomplish in order to be greater, next year? Um, but yeah, I think you're right. You have to evolve your leadership position. You can't be the account manager and the CEO. So if I get involved in a customer, like here, I'm, learning our customer base and tried to add value at a certain point, you have to be, direct about it and empower your team. Like, hey, thanks. I really appreciate, these have been a great series of conversations and the team's got it from here. Or if you're getting into a challenging situation, letting the team know that, hey, the team can take it from here. You can't be involved at the same level. It's not good for the customer and it's not good for those people that you want to be able to keep empowering in their careers too.
You just want to go a little bit. on a sidebar, you mentioned 2 or 3 times already in the conversation. You seem happy in Armada. That's where I'm going to. So what has surprised you about the customer culture or services more?
Yeah, yes, really happy. Like I made a choice. I made a really distinct choice after 31 years to do something different.
Hmm.
And that I wanted this chapter to be unique. And I spent some time thinking about what that was going to be. Um, yeah, I knew the founder, John Burke, and I knew the CEO, Joe Dominigiani, for years. And I knew the business from afar. So as I was thinking about options, the three of us got together in my year off, and I got to know that the business matched the culture that I knew in them. Again, I knew the reputation. I knew that,
Hmm.
especially in the food service space, a credible reputation, very hard to unseat. Um, I knew in St. Louis, Sunset Acquisition, a very strong executor on the both outsource and transactional side and domestic and cross-border transportation, but I didn't know it deeply. So you asked about surprises. I did get to know it enough that I saw really big competitive advantages here. And I guess my happiness is that they're even bigger than I thought.
Okay.
I saw amazing people as I was thinking about this opportunity. My bar was pretty high. And I've seen it to be even better than my high expectations. Armada's I don't know how much you know about the company, but a little unique in that we really are an integrator, and I would say really an orchestrator in supply chain. And we go very deep upstream and downstream into supply chain. We've got inventory services, and we have 4 large distribution centers. But even before then, we're integrating the supplier with the final mile distributor in our restaurant business. There's a lot of engineering upfront and technology and AI involved in our space. And then we've got these broad level of services from the inventory to the transportation management. Kind of unique. Those are both, I haven't had both of those in the toolkit before in leading positions. There's advisory services plus the execution, where a lot of our customers will say, "Hey, I don't need to go to a consultant because I've got you." But you also knock it out of the park from an execution standpoint. And then there's this very unique managed transportation side of the business. Um, so a $6 billion company, and the majority of it's managed transportation and inventory, a lot of consolidation of LTL, of slower moving products, especially into that restaurant space. So it's grown to this very, very big company. Um, but the one thing I thought was very unique was this carrier base of large and medium-sized carriers, a little bit more concentrated, where Armada's treated them a little bit more like a shipper has, even like a great shipper has. A lot of loyalty in both sides in terms of how we contract on the managed freight side. Tons of transparency on the customer side, but I thought the biggest thing that I saw here was this company that had grown primarily with its great reputation and great culture. It is a customer first culture um, that is very much a uh, listen to the customer's challenge and then go find a way to get it done. And that appealed to me completely. And this culture, and I just saw that from us, so the people and services and commitment culture fit. And then I saw sort of the weapons in the arsenal seem to be broader than anything that I thought existed in the marketplace. And I really do describe it as the software companies have kind of owned this orchestration label, but that is really what we do. It's frequently, so, described as a company that's hard to describe, but it started with a people match. And yeah, happy is a great way to describe it.
No, no, you definitely, it comes across. And kudos for you. And at the end, and great that you're seeing that upside. So let's explore that commercial excellence. How does it really look like in practice, if I may? So, you know, again, you leave this full commercial business end to end, right? So all of it, we've gone through it. And now you're the ultimate leader. So, what does most organizations still get wrong about commercial teams? And so, how do you see the connection also between marketing and sales? Elaborate a little bit on that, if you may.
Yeah. Well, marketing sales is a good subject. One of the main things that attracted me here to this great company was that a lot of the growth had been because they did such an amazing job with their customers. And someone would leave and go to another large brand and bring in Armada. There's been sales efforts and a sales team, especially on the, I mentioned one of our acquisitions was Sunset. We're bringing in three businesses: the legacy Armada business, uh, that is primarily in the food service space. Sunset, the more traditional, very diversified across industry, 3PL, primarily in North American truckload and LTL. And then ATEC, also food service oriented, ocean services, a lot to the Caribbean and Latin American marketplaces. We're integrating those into Armada today, right now. Um, I would say, you know, to get back to the original subject there, that one of the unique challenges has been just building out the sales and marketing team. And that was part of my mission coming in. That was, one thing that was on the agenda.
Mhm.
Integration wasn't as necessarily, but I saw that as the thing that needed to happen in order to build the marketing machine, is let's do it under one bigger brand. Um, but I wanted to build a team where sales and marketing were uniquely connected. And that's really how I've always seen them. We did bring in a chief marketing officer, and she and I really identified with that common goal that marketing is there to support the sales force, and marketing doesn't lay down something that sales can't pick up. It's about leads. Leads and revenue are the common connection for me between sales and marketing. And um, I've always driven those two things into almost like one organization, if you will. Uh, in my experience with customers, I thought that frequently, the marketing team would complain about a sales team, or sales team would complain about marketing. It just made no sense to me.
Yeah.
And it was always different. I ran a shop like that much differently. I'm doing that again here, and just building. I don't see the purpose of marketing if it is not to grow your business, and if it's not to help the sales team sell. And brand recognition too. I mean, building the brand, building the culture is also to an end, right? It's to keep your customers and go out and find ways to get more of them. To me, marketing and sales are almost the same thing. They just use different tools to get revenue.
Well, I can hear you how you're applying those lessons in Armada now, especially now this food services rooted business. I have to imagine that is heavy relationships driven, and reliability is something that has to matter as much as innovation, I guess. Is that a fair?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. It's like, it's relationship based, just like any services industry. The technology is really important, but it's powered by people as well. I've always believed that that's going to be the real differentiator, and we have that here.
So
Is
now that's interesting because even the best commercial organizations eventually reach the limits of what people alone can do, right? Or can coordinate. So that's where technology really becomes a force multiplier. You're not just replacing judgment, but amplifying it really. So I'd like to shift towards how you're really thinking about innovation and technology as drivers of profitable growth, if I may. So again, Armada's history over a century. I've had to guess that the customers today are radically different than 100 and some years ago. How do you think about innovation in a business with such deep operational roots?
Yeah, yeah, the company does go back over 100 years, but it's been focusing on supply chain services and technology solutions more for the last 30, really. It grew out of a
Okay.
food company that led it into this space, but the roots do go back much further than that. Um, and I think that although the business has been around, my mission is not to drive or change a culture. The culture of innovation happened here. Um,
Okay.
the way that the business was created, the model here for the types of consolidations and way we drive savings for our customers is unique. The freight management model, again, it kind of grew up in a vacuum. It didn't copy a traditional brokerage model. It was really created almost, with some shipper mentality. Um, and they pretty quickly had, a very large restaurant customer to be able to build this business around. And that drove what I would say is kind of a very unique origin story of building it almost from scratch without the noise of, hey, is it the Chicago model or the
Okay.
uh, the carrier or customer team split. It was really created almost in this perfect customer vacuum of what's the best way to design this with a transparent relationship with the customer in order to drive ultimate transparency to the different parts of cost and where they're driven, and figure that out, make it visible to the customer, and drive them down. So I think it was a great origin for the business, and me coming here, um, although it's been around for 100 years, it's been innovating for 100 years too. And I just found unique partners who were doing amazing things. And I think the places that we'll keep innovating, of course, we're going to keep adding technology, and we're doing that now today. We're using AI more than we ever have. We're going to do it in our unique way, which I can talk about. But the culture of innovation was already there. And I don't know that it went back 100 years, but it is really strong with this business, and it starts with a team that just loves to get amazing things done for a customer, and uh, you know every month we're trying something new for a customer. We that's It's a really broad space we play in, especially with our large integrated customers. We're in this problem solving business, and I would say the coolest thing I've heard from them is, hey, you identify problems that we have and you solve them. And to me, that was kind of the missing link or the holy grail of long-term supply chain relationships. Customers sometimes got stale in my past experience, that they would start. The biggest thing I would ever get pushed on was, hey, I'm starting to, year three, bring my challenges to you. And I just don't hear that here. So yeah, we're going to keep innovating in marketing and sales. We're doing that. We're doing some amazing things. We're going to get this great story out on the street. But innovation here is not like a cultural area that I felt like I've had to swim upstream at all.
That's interesting. Maybe just one question, technology, because at the end, there's a lot of my audience are technology driven. So how do you decide when to build or when to buy or when to partner with a company? It's very different business models, right? How's your framework thought on that?
Yeah, it is a different business model. So, and we're doing a little bit of both. Um, so we will buy when there's something that's at scale, that is, taking care of a common challenge, something revolved around transactions, transaction management, reduction of cost. But if somebody's built something out there that's already at scale, we will and do buy and own a lot of off-the-shelf and point solutions there. When it comes to unique customer challenges, then we're building a lot of that ourselves,
Okay.
and creating our own agents around unique customer challenges. So I
Hmm.
think we'll always keep doing a little bit of both,
Both. Okay.
regardless of our size as we go forward.
That makes sense to me. At the end, technology changes rapidly, but at the end, leadership principles tend to endure, right? So whether you're talking AI, data, automation, at the end, leaders are the ones that decide where to invest or where to build or how to create that long-term value. So now your career gives really a unique perspective on leadership across very different companies, because I want to go there because you operate inside a public Fortune 250, right? And now you lead a private company. Both are very different in scale, in culture. What leadership lessons only become clear after you've seen both worlds?
You know, I really think people almost make too big a deal out of that
Okay.
public versus private, or there's certainly differences. I just think that those differences aren't consistently experienced. You know, you can have a public company that's agile, and you can have a private company that doesn't know how to get out of its own way. Unfortunately, I haven't had that experience so far in either. You know, my Fortune 250 experience started at a privately held company that was management owned and later took it public. Um, I would say it's more about you and your approach and the culture that you build. Um, but I think recognizing that, I got to recognize that a little bit more. I always assumed that to be true, but I think, you know, my experience in looking back at it, now spending some time outside of a public company, I do recognize, you know, a little bit more how people make assumptions about your background too, or the way you might be used to operating. And like, oh no, I never really thought of it
Yes.
that way. I didn't, you know, it's these are people, not, you know, everyone thinks differently. Every company's different. Um, but I do find, you know, I don't know if I had to experience it this way, but I do see that being on the other side, it is easy to make assumptions about, you know, when I started in my career, the company's 1,000 employees. That's, you know, that's where Armada was when I started here. So you know, there are differences, and I like where I'm at now. I like the model, but you can choose to be nimble regardless of the company size and regardless of the ownership structure. But I've just been amazed at, like, when you walk in the door, you know, that resume can sometimes precede you, and people make assumptions about how you might think about things that frankly aren't always all that accurate.
So we're pivoting towards a section that I always like to leave the audience with some thoughts and just you know, some learnings from my guests, right? So for operators stepping into broader leadership roles, what's one mindset shift that accelerates their impact? Well, which one you'll pick?
Um, you know, I'm a big believer in mindset and mindset shift. Um, and I believe it's one of the biggest things that you can control. Um, for me, I always thought it was a big advantage to have known the business, how it operates from the ground floor. And I think too many people can lose that on the way up. And I think it is a mindset shift to say, I'm going to keep that. I'm going to make sure I use that to accelerate. So I think that is huge. And my mindset has always been aggressively pushing for more growth, more expectations. Um, you know, I'm just got this unbreakable belief that our future is huge because of the great advantages that we have and the solutions that we have in the marketplace. And whether you're a leader or not, I believe that mindset is the thing that you can control. And a growth mindset versus a fixed one is the thing I've seen be powerful for so many successful people. It's one that came a little bit more naturally to me, but you do have to practice it. But you know, I catch myself doing it, you know, quite a bit. It drives greater expectations for yourself, and I think that's where it starts with me. Is I hold myself to a higher standard from an energy and production and output standpoint, and that filters down to the way I drive expectations for growth for a company.
Oh, I love you. You always aim high, and I think that's great. So, you know, so we've covered leadership, customers, commercial strategy, technology. Underneath all those topics, though, there's something really deeper that every successful leader seems to possess, and I would argue that's sustained momentum, right? So I'd like to finish with the signature question we ask every guest that comes through this podcast. So, when you think about momentum, not just growth, but sustainable momentum, right? So, what's one decision, habit, or belief that has made the biggest difference in your personal career?
You know, I talked about mindset. If it was a habit to me, it's probably reading. And to me, the corollary to that is curiosity. You know, I read a lot. I force myself
I
to
know.
read. I don't have to force myself to be curious. Uh, but the act of reading is not, is not what my objective. It is to learn. And I'm constantly asking myself that question in anything, what's that? I think it's made a difference in my career and being open to different things like jumping over to Europe. Um, but I think, so reading might be the habit, but I guess I would go back to that. I talked about being, jumping into those uncomfortable areas, the customer that might not be loving what you're doing and spending time there. That skill is something that you do have to learn. Um, and I think it's so good for you in so many different ways. And it is a habit that you have to practice, whether it's giving developmental feedback um, or or dealing with a challenging situation. I've gotten comfortable with it in those uncomfortable situations, and I think it's what allows me to go, that extra step and talk to the customer who I might know is not going to give me exactly what I want to hear, but I think that again starts with being curious. I'd rather know. And I don't mind if that news isn't great, because I'm
Awesome.
trying to figure a little bit of everything out, and I think that goes back to curiosity.
Okay, absolutely. I've known you for years, and I definitely you brought back a couple of memories of talking about books and articles and that. So I can attest that's absolutely true. The Chris I know at least. So this has been a powerful conversation. Your journey, from frontline sales to now the CEO of a private company into its next chapter, driving them into the next chapter is really the exact type of stories that we aim to surface in this podcast, right? And so I really just want to give you thanks for sharing your experiences, your perspectives, and your leadership journey with all of us today. Any final comments you want to make?
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much, Luis. You've been a part of my journey at different steps, and it's so great to reconnect with you now at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Chris. Thanks for being here. So, to our audience, if today's discussion sparked a new idea, challenge a long-held belief, or help you think differently about the future of supply chains, please subscribe and share this episode with your colleagues, founders, operators, investors, anybody across your network. I'm Luis Solana, and this is the Momentum Flow, where clarity, capital, and conviction keep supply chains and leaders moving forward. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and keep the momentum flowing. Thank you.